a storm is gathering on NATO's eastern flank. As Russian drones pierce European skies, America's allies plead with President Trump. Do not pull back your troops. But Washington hesitates. Is this strategy or surrender? Eastern European leaders are urging US President Donald Trump to keep US troops on NATO's eastern flank after a wave of Russian air and drone incursions. The European countries are worried that Vladimir Putin is pushing the limits and will believe only what he sees from allied defenses. Ministers from Estonia, Lithuania and Romania said the alliance must harden its posture, move from air policing to integrated air and missile defenses, sharpen rules of engagement, and sustain US troop rotations. All of that for a certain name called Vladimir Putin.
There is no final decision, but there is a very, very clear sentiment that it doesn't happen overnight. So, we discuss amongst NATO allies what is the best solution. And I do hope that the US troops will remain at least in our region, because the tension on the eastern flank is increasing, and US participation is one of the strongest deterrents, to be honest. We see that the front line is the best place for them to be. We are providing the best host nation support. We are providing the training areas, and if you know, it delivers the best result. It delivers deterrence to Russians. So, concerning the posture review, that's the place where United States troops have to be. I have all the arguments to prove this.
However, these appeals didn't seem to land in Washington, as Trump earlier this year suggested a new national security strategy aimed at prioritizing homeland defense. Before the most recent incursions from Russia, US officials had cautioned allies to prepare for a reduction of the American footprint, pressing Europe to take on a greater share of the burden. They paired the military message with calls for tighter sanctions and an end to European energy dependence that funds the Kremlin's war machine. Despite speculation about drawdowns, though, Trump and senior officials have sharpened their rhetoric against Russia. On September 22nd, US Ambassador to the UN Mike Waltz pledged Washington would defend every inch of NATO territory. Trump suggested intruding Russian aircraft should be shot down and insisted Ukraine, with European support, can take back all of its territory. Although Trump and contradictory statements are a thing of old, the lack of clarity from Washington raises a few questions. Is Trump really confused? Or is there a double game at play? Is Putin's resistance making the US nervous? And more importantly, what are the consequences of a military pullout by America? If Trump actually decides to pull a significant portion of US troops from Europe, the effects would be dramatic for European security, NATO cohesion, and the broader transatlantic relationship. US troop withdrawals would directly reduce NATO's forward deterrence along the alliance's eastern flank, especially in Poland, the Baltics, and other frontline states. While some analysts believe Trump might use withdrawal threats primarily as a bargaining tool to extract more defense spending or economic concessions from European allies, a real pullout would mark a historic shift in US policy, potentially ending the tripwire deterrence that has been in place since the Cold War. In June last year, Putin had mocked the situation of Euro-Atlantic security.
It is evident that the entire system of Euro-Atlantic security is crumbling before our eyes. At present, it is practically non-existent and must be rebuilt. To achieve this, we must collaborate with interested countries, of which there are many, to develop our own strategies for ensuring security in Eurasia, and then present them for broader international deliberation.
This was a not-so-subtle hint from Putin to America. He wanted to tell the US that he knows the order is changing. And in that changing order, it is Putin who holds an equal number of cards as Trump, if not more. Russian strategists are monitoring these developments closely. Some hardline voices in Moscow are calling for stronger military postures, including renewed nuclear threats, aiming to unsettle European political will and encourage divisions within the alliance. Should the US withdrawal signal a lasting Western disengagement, analysts believe Russia could become more aggressive across a broad front, ramping up hybrid attacks, conventional military threats, and political subversion against both NATO members and other vulnerable neighbors. Despite the dire consequences of a military shift, Trump seems to have made up his mind, at least for Eastern Europe it seems, and if murmurs are true, the pullout might have already begun, although a little subtly. The first clue that something had changed in the American approach to selling military equipment to Europe came as Denmark neared a decision on the purchase of a multi-billion-dollar air defense system. For weeks, American and French negotiators had aggressively pursued the deal, but as the deadline approached, the Pentagon suddenly lost interest. According to a recent report by The Atlantic magazine, ultimately, Denmark signed a $9.1 billion deal to buy long-range air defense systems made by a joint French-Italian venture, and medium-range systems from Norway, Germany, or France. It was Denmark's largest ever purchase of arms. Military sales have long been a key tool of American foreign policy, a way to secure national security interests abroad by bolstering friends' defense capabilities. The United States first began to sell military equipment to nations it deemed friendly as a way to shore up alliances at the height of the Cold War and expand its influence overseas, which makes the development even more worrisome for the Pentagon. Does the reluctance to sell arms to Europe mean the MAGA movement is catching up to America's foreign policy? We found that out in February this year, when on his first trip abroad as Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth said in a speech in Brussels.
Stark strategic realities prevent the U.S. from being primarily focused on the security of Europe. Instead, Washington would focus on securing its southern border and countering China.
If Washington truly begins to scale back its weapons sales to Europe, the shift could mark the first tangible sign of a broader American retreat from the continent, raising urgent questions about how the United States would disengage and what form its presence in Europe might take in the years ahead. US forces have been stationed in and deployed to Europe since the end of World War II. Numbers have fluctuated since that time, reaching a high of roughly 475,000 active duty personnel in the late 1950s, when the US military served as a bulwark against Soviet and Warsaw Pact forces at the height of the Cold War. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, those numbers dropped to the tens of thousands. According to the United States European Command, the United States had nearly 84,000 US service members in Europe in early 2025. The total amount varies due to planned exercises and regular rotations of troops in and out of the continent. For example, following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, some 20,000 additional US soldiers were deployed to states neighboring Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine to support Kyiv and contain the conflict. Over the course of the war, the total number of troops has ranged between approximately 75,000 and 105,000 military personnel, primarily from the Air Force, Army, and Navy. From Greenland's icy edge to Turkey's border with Russia, the United States maintains over 40 military bases across Europe. The real hub, though, is Central Europe, think Germany, Italy, Poland, and the United Kingdom, where the lion's share of American forces are based. Stuttgart in Germany hosts the heart of US operations, with the United States European Command's headquarters and links to Africa Command. And leaving these bases is bound to leave a hole, and Russia might just be waiting for exactly that.